Behold the beauty of destruction. As enemies home in on your position, you pull the trigger and marvel as the screen fills with particles, smoke, and wanton destruction. As the air clears, you're then left with an eerie calm. It's this ebb and flow between the quiet and the loud that serves as the fabric of Selaco, a new first-person shooter developed by a very small team built on 26-year-old technology, sort of. Selaco is technically in early access, but you'd never guess it. The included campaign has a lot of meat, and the experience is impressively polished. It's also unique. You see, while it may resemble the modern quote-unquote boomer shooter at first glance, Selaco is something different. In a way, it feels like an homage to Monolith's seminal Fear, combined with Irrational Games' System Shock 2 and id Software's Doom, though there's more to it than just that. But it's that last point regarding Doom that's so important here. You see, Selaco is built on GZDoom, a fork derived from ZDoom, which itself was created thanks to John Carmack's release of the original Doom's source code back in the 90s. ZDoom itself first appeared in 1998, and the creativity that has emerged since this era has cemented Doom as one of the most important video games in history. And Selaco itself is a direct descendant of Doom and its ilk. Yet it also features a type of design and a feel to the gameplay that we've not really seen in other sprite-based shooters before. And that's kind of what I want to talk about, this interesting mix between the creative use of old technology combined with this almost tactical style gameplay. So, to begin, arguably the most eye-catching aspect here is the sheer volume of interactivity and destruction on display. Honestly, it's the kind of thing we often forget about in modern video games. They're largely static, but in this case it really makes a difference. Each skirmish turns the surrounding area into a war zone. And with the options set accordingly, these details do not disappear in time. Essentially, each and every level is packed full of surfaces and objects designed to be shot or interacted with. It has its roots in games like Duke Nukem 3D, really, but it kind of reminds me of the tanker chapter in Metal Gear Solid 2, where the game simply invites you to play around with its environments. Most smaller objects are fully destructible, and they explode in a satisfying manner. Selaco also leans heavily on voxelized objects, which I've always liked, but these objects actually have variable states of destruction, as you can see from this chair. Even more impressive, the sound effects used to bring this destruction to life deliver such a strong impact that it really transforms the experience. Let me demonstrate here. Just listen carefully as I walk around shooting random objects. That sounds great, right? I was really surprised to hear so many unique sounds, and when combined with the frantic combat, it really does gel into this chaotic ballet of death. There's other neat visual effects associated with destruction as well. Shoot a fire extinguisher, for instance, and the room fills with powder, complete with contribution from nearby light sources. Furthermore, with these options engaged, all the destruction and death becomes persistent across loading screens. You can wander freely between all the different areas, and returning to earlier levels reveals that all the damage remains intact. This really helps strengthen the impression of leaving a path of destruction in your wake. But while there's obviously a lot of destruction and chaos within the game, in reality, Selaco does not play like Doom. And this is where the Fear inspirations come into play. It's more of a tactical shooter with enemies that are extremely intense, requiring you to deal with them in creative ways. Even on easy, your life bar will drain quickly. You'll need to take cover and flank your foes. If you run in guns a-blazing, you will likely die. This is supported by surprisingly robust enemy AI. There's an entire system in place that determines the aggression and intensity of the foes, but the key here is that enemies, when they enter a room, will flank you, they will hunt you down, and dealing with this is a huge part of the challenge. And this is where tactics play a role. No, this is not Rainbow Six, but dealing with these enemies definitely requires you to take full advantage of your environment and positioning, which I found extremely engaging. It's this combination of strong AI opponents and destructible environments that really turns Selaco into something special. But of course, there's more. The visual design itself is a huge triumph. While GZDoom certainly has its roots in ZDoom, time has not stood still, and GZDoom has continued to evolve with many new features that would have been impossible for the original Doom engine. But even still, it is limited compared to other modern engines, making its accomplishments more exciting. The Selaco team has managed to push this engine beyond what I even thought possible. There is just so much going on in every level, and it's honestly beautiful. Basically, while it's built on the foundation of Doom, GZDoom is capable of things such as slopes, advanced lighting features, voxel objects, and a lot more. Problem is, just dropping these into the original Doom never produced great results, which is to be expected since it wasn't designed with these in mind. Selaco, on the other hand, was built entirely around the features of GZDoom, and it sure makes great use of them. Take lighting, for instance. There's dynamic lighting, of course, complete with muzzle flashes and muzzle flash shadows, by the way, not to mention a flashlight that also casts shadows, which is then mixed with a heavy use of static colored lighting throughout the spaces, which lends it this almost late 90s aesthetic a la Unreal. You know, greens, blues, purples, and the like. It's really quite eye-catching. Thanks to GZDoom, Selaco does feature more complex level layouts than what would be possible in Doom, kinda reminiscent of the build engine really. This means they can do actual slopes, not to mention faked reflections where the scenery is basically drawn below the main map, while transparent textures give the impression of a shiny floor. Just looking around the game world, there's this sense that the developers have managed to figure out how to walk this fine line between something that feels suitably retro yet still contemporary. As a result, Selaco ends up looking quite unlike anything else I can think of. For instance, the textures and lighting have more of a modern sensibility, but if you look closely, you'll still see the limitations of sector-based map design. While GZDoom does allow certain things that wouldn't have been possible in Doom itself, many of the maps still manage to adhere to those limitations. One feature it does not use, however, is support for 3D models for characters and weapons. And this is perhaps one of my favorite elements. A ton of work has been poured into the sprites and weapons used in Selaco. The thing about using sprites versus articulated 3D models is that it allows you to dial in perfect posing, since you need to manually create each unique frame. This is most evident in the weapons, which for my money are among the best I've ever seen in this style of shooter. Using individual 2D frames, the weapons are drawn at a very high resolution and even accept lighting and effects from within the scene. Every frame of a reload animation feels precise and punchy, and certain frames even exhibit pseudo motion blur or depth of field. When you engage precise aiming, for instance, the weapon appears suitably out of focus, which is a beautiful effect, yet it's still just 2D artwork. The sheer quality of the individual animations, the punchiness of every frame, mixed in with those particles, man, I just can't praise this enough. It looks incredible. Even for folks that aren't especially into the retro aesthetic, there's a lot to love here. Being that it's GZDoom based though, I was unsurprised to see an options menu packed full of adjustment. What did surprise me though is the quality of the UI itself. Again, everything just feels wholly bespoke. The fonts, the graphics, the animation of the menu itself, all of it looks great. Plus, there's a ton of graphics and control options for both visual and performance tuning. But do you really need to tweak the settings on a Doom engine based game? To find out, I wanted to test this on the Steam Deck, which is the lowest spec PC I have in my possession. Naturally, I wanted to test this bad boy on the Steam Deck, and as it turns out, it's more demanding than I had anticipated, though this is likely due to a CPU bottleneck as a result of its Doom engine roots. Selaco does at least include Steam Deck specific menu options and presets though, including a performance and quality mode. Alas, 90 FPS was impossible on the Steam Deck OLED, and even hitting 60 FPS is pretty difficult. It dips often enough in combat, though it still manages to feel okay overall. Given this, I suggest clamping the frame rate down to 50 FPS instead for a more even experience, or even 45. Still though, it's very playable on the Steam Deck and low-end machines, it just takes a little tweaking. So that covers the visuals, but earlier I mentioned the sound, yet I only referenced the sound effects. The music is another element worthy of praise, and I wanted to highlight it here. The sound mix often weaves between atmospheric music, ambient sound, and driving beats to great effect. Check it out.
Move into position and wait for my signal. Ready? Let's go!
Pretty good stuff, right? Now the final thing I want to quickly discuss here is the gameplay and design. You see, I already mentioned that it's more of a tactical combat game, but there's also the matter of level design and general flow. This is where the aforementioned reference to System Shock comes in. No, this is not actually an immersive sim, and in fact if you type 0451 into any of the game's keypads you take damage, but it does share certain elements with those games which I feel enhance the overall experience. Things like puzzles to solve at points, like here where you have to find a way to get this explosive container over to another side of the room so that you can blow up a wall. There's things like key cards and codes to find, along with other environmental challenges. This kind of stuff really fleshes out the overall experience and encourages exploration. It's the kind of stuff that also made Half-Life really sing back in the day, and it's cool to see it in a sector-based, sprite-driven game. But I do have one word of caution. The game's first couple of levels are, quite frankly, somewhat confusing. Once you get your head around it, it's fine, but I've seen a lot of folks online, including myself, struggle with navigation early on. Basically, where the heck do you go? The issue is that the environments here are so incredibly dense and packed with objects, which look really cool, but it can be somewhat tricky to parse. Yet, after you break free of the hospital labs, this does improve markedly. Exploration is still required, of course, but it feels more rewarding and less confusing. Still, all this is to say that while Selaco is not perfect by any means, it's one of the cooler games I've played this year. It's a game that doesn't lean too hard on games of the past despite running on ancient technology, and instead manages to leverage those elements while also creating something that feels satisfying to play even in the modern era. The game is of course still in early access, but right now the included campaign is certainly worth your time. There is a lot to love here, so give it a look. That's going to do it for me though, so we'll see you next time.